the 1st of November 1943. Dawn cracked over the Solomon Islands like a reluctant promise, but for the 14,000 Marines of the 3rd Division hitting the beaches at Cape Torokina, it felt more like a curse. This wasn't the wide-open coral sands of Guadalcanal, no sir. Bougainville was a beast of its own. A volcanic island wrapped in a choking green shroud of jungle, where the undergrowth tangled your boots like it had a personal grudge, and swamps sucked at your legs deeper than quicksand in an old western flick. The air hung heavy with the rot of mangroves and the buzz of mosquitoes thick enough to blot out the sun. Every step forward meant hauling supplies by hand, ammo crates, water cans, and those godforsaken sea rations over trails that weren't trails at all, just mud slicks patrolled by unseen eyes. Staff Sergeant Thomas Michael Callahan, a lanky 22-year-old from the wide-open ranches of Montana's Bitterroot Valley, crouched low behind a berm of volcanic soil, his cheek welded to the worn stock of his Springfield .03. The Unatel 8X scope blurred the world into a tunnel of green haze, but he could make out the shapes. Japanese positions hunkered in the tree line across a ragged clearing, maybe 700 yards out. Palm fronds swayed like lazy sentinels, hiding bunkers and sniper nests that the coast watchers, those unsung Aussie and Kiwi scouts holed up in the hills, had tipped off division about days earlier. Eyes in the sky, they called them, radioing back cords on enemy patrols, and those damn tree platforms the Nips loved for their infiltrators. But intel only got you so far in this soup. The real fight was in the waiting, the sweat stinging your eyes while your heart thumped a rhythm against your ribs. Callahan shifted, careful not to rustle the fern fronds he'd woven into his ghillie suit. Back home, he'd stalk mule deer through aspen groves, patient as the wind, reading the twitch of an ear or the flick of a tail. Here, it was the same game, but the stakes were men, boys like him, fresh off the boats from Pendleton, green as the vines climbing their foxholes. The perimeter at Empress Augusta Bay stretched thin, a fragile line against a regiment that had been dug in since '42, their Type 99 rifles whispering death from the canopy. Marines were dropping to snipers' crack shots who'd wait hours for a helmet glint or a careless smoke. 3, 4 a day in the first week, turning patrols into funerals. And the swamps? They didn't just slow you down, they broke you. Corokina Lagoon, just inland, had swallowed whole squads, men vanishing into the muck up to their necks, gear dragging them under like anchors. Artillery from the cruisers offshore could pound the tree line over 5,000 rounds in the first 24 hours of the landing, but it couldn't root out the ghosts in the green. As the mist burned off around 0530 on November 11, Callahan's gloved hand steadied a makeshift rig, a dented Campbell's chicken noodle can, ends snipped clean with his P-38, propped on a bamboo stake 15 yards left. He'd punched a pinhole in the side the night before, angling it just so against the first slant of sun. No brass or mirrors from supply, just this scrap from last night's chow, reflecting a spear of light across the killing ground like a signal flare gone rogue. In his scope, he watched it dance, a brief, teasing flash aimed square at a thicket of fronds masking what the spotters swore was an observation post. 2 seconds, that's all it held, enough to prick curiosity in a sentry's mind, but not enough to scream trap. 700 yards away, a shadow stirred. A Japanese observer, head barely cresting the sandbags, leaned out for a better look. 3 seconds of exposure, his binoculars catching the gleam. Callahan's finger curled on the trigger, breath held like a prayer. The Springfield barked once, a 30-06 round, slicing the humid air on a 2-second arc. Wind dropped 2 feet right and 30 inches high for the cross breeze off the bay. The figure slumped, helmet tumbling into the ferns, 1 down. But in the quiet that followed, as the echo faded into the jungle's hum, Callahan didn't celebrate. He just glassed the tree line harder, knowing this was no lone wolf, this was the opening shot in a week that had rewrite the rules of the hunt. The swamps might claim bodies, but it was the mind that won wars out here, turning sunlight into a lure and trash into terror. And Thomas Callahan, farm boy turned ghost in the green, was about to prove it. 6 months earlier, back in the dusty sprawl of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Thomas Callahan wasn't yet the ghost haunting Bougainville's fringes. He was just Tommy from Hamilton, Montana, a kid with calloused hands from wrangling fence posts and a 30-06 Winchester that had seen more elk hides than foxholes. Pearl Harbor had lit a fire under him like it did half the boys in his high school class. The 8th of December 1941. He was 19, knee-deep in snow, tracking a bull elk through the Bitterroots aspen stands when the news crackled over the ranch radio. Japs bombed the fleet, the announcer barked, and something twisted in Tommy's gut, not rage, exactly, but a quiet resolve, the kind that comes from knowing the world's bigger than your valley. By week's end, he was on a Greyhound to Butte, enlisting with the Corps because, hell, they needed men who could shoot straight and keep their mouths shut. Basic at Lejeune was a grind of close-order drill and salt spray runs, but it was the rifle range that woke something in him. March 1943, under a sky bruised with thunderheads, Captain Harold Morrison clocked him during quals. While the platoon banged away at 300-yard poppers like it was a 4th of July barbecue, Callahan took his time, 15 extra seconds per shot, squinting into the crosswind off the Atlantic that whipped the range flags sideways. 48 out of 50, iron sights only, each round punching clean centers like he'd whispered to the wind itself. Morrison, a wiry vet from Tulagi with a scar snaking his jaw, pulled him aside after. "You hunt back home, son? That ain't recruit luck. Elk, mostly. Some mule deer," Callahan muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. 700 yards, Daddy's old 6, iron sights. Wind off the mountains teaches you quick. Morrison's eyes narrowed, appraising. 3 days later, orders came. Scout Sniper School at Pendleton, California. The Corps program back then wasn't about racking up body counts like some John Wayne reel, it was reconnaissance first, blood second. "You're the eyes of the division," Gunnery Sergeant William Henderson growled to the class of 20, his voice gravel from too many smokes in too many atolls. A bull-necked Texan who'd ghosted Japs on Tarawa's beaches, Henderson paced the sandbag classroom like a caged panther. "Killing's the last resort. You watch. You report. But when you pull that trigger, you make it echo psychologically speaking. Haunt the survivors. Let 'em hear the ghost in every rustle." Callahan soaked it up like parched earth after rain. The stalking drills crawling a half-mile through coastal scrub to within 200 yards of instructors with binos felt like home. He'd vanish for hours, belly flat to the dirt, breath sink to the ground's pulse, just like waiting out a wary buck in the Bitterroots draws. 9 hours for his final exam, moving only when the instructor's eyes drifted. He stood up waving after the shot, dust-caked and grinning faint. Henderson clapped his shoulder later, voice low. "You're a natural, kid. But remember, Japs ain't elk, they learn. Patterns kill you faster than bullets. The sniper who lasts. He never repeats a trick." Graduation meant a berth on the USS George Clymer, churning south to the Solomons in July 43. By November 1, Callahan was knee-deep in Bougainville's muck, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, humping his Springfield through the beachhead scramble. The first week was pure infantry hell, no scopes needed for the banzai rushes or the infiltrators slinking in under moonless skies. Japanese snipers, perched in those elevated tree platforms the Nips engineered like devil's nests, picked off patrols with surgical spite. Coast Watcher reports from the island's interior whispered via hidden radios pinned down a dozen such hides, but rooting them out meant patrols that chewed through men like swamp water through boots. Small unit tactics ruled here. Scout ahead, mark the ghosts, call in the 105 seconds from the bay. But marksmanship? That was secondary to the stalk, the read on enemy nerves frayed by isolation and endless green. Nights in the perimeter foxholes, Callahan scratched letters home on ration wrappers, the jungle's chorus cicadas screaming like banshees drowning his thought. "Ma, this place eats souls," he wrote once, ink smudging in the humid dark. "Ain't like the mountains. There, you hunt to eat. Here, you hunt to not be hunted." He'd share smokes with his spotter, Corporal James Rivera, a wiry kid from East LA with a quick laugh and eyes that missed nothing, swapping stories to keep the black at bay. "Back home, Tommy, we'd cruise Whittier Boulevard, dodging cholos," Rivera'd say, flicking ash into the void. This is dodging death in stereo." Callahan nod, staring at the stars punch through the canopy. Elk didn't hate you, they just wanted to live. But out there, in the rustle of fronds, were men with families, 2 sons of samurai or farmers, drilled to die for an emperor across an ocean. The ethics gnawed at him, a quiet ache under the trigger finger. Henderson's words echoed, "Haunt 'em." But how do you haunt without becoming the monster? Little did he know, the jungle would answer that question soon enough, with a glint of sunlight off a humble can of soup. November 8, 1943. The perimeter at Empress Augusta Bay had hardened into a scar of sandbags and razor wire by then, but the jungle didn't care about lines on maps. It pushed back with roots that snaked through foxholes and vines that strangled your poncho at night. Patrols out of the 2nd Battalion had been probing the fringes, small teams slipping through the mangroves toward the narrow river, where Coast Watcher dispatches warned of fresh Japanese reinforcements filtering in from the east. Infiltration was their game. Nips in blackface, bellies to the mud, crawling yards at a time to plant satchel charges or pick off sentries. Snipers were the worst. Elevated platforms lashed into banyan limbs, camouflaged so well you'd swear the trees themselves were firing. Callahan and Rivera were on recon that afternoon, humping through a swampy draw off the main trail, binos slung low and Springfields at high port. Rivera, ever the optimist, cracked wise about the sludge sucking at their boots. "Tommy, this ain't no LA beach party. Feels like God's bathtub after a bender." Callahan grunted a laugh, scanning the canopy through his scope habit from the Bitterroot, where an overlooked shadow meant going home empty-handed. They were 400 yards out, marking a suspected nest the spotters had flagged. A cluster of palms with unnatural sway, too deliberate for wind. Rivera raised his binos for a closer peek, just 3 seconds, glassing the fronds for glint of steel or stir of cloth. The crack came first, a suppressed pop, like a branch snap, but Callahan knew better. Rivera's head jerked back, a neat red hole blooming above his right eye, binos clattering into the muck. He folded without a sound, body slumping into the ferns like a puppet with cut strings. 600 yards out, through the haze, Callahan's scope caught the faint crown of a rifle barrel, withdrawing into the foliage a Type 99 Arisaka, profile unmistakable, perched in one of those tree hides, the nips built like spiderwebs. The shooter was good, disciplined. No follow-up, no rustle to confirm the kill. Just gone, swallowed by the green. Callahan froze, belly down in the slime, pulse hammering like a tripwire in his ears. 30 minutes he lay there, unmoving, the swamp's chorus mocking him, frogs croaking, leaves whispering secrets. Grief hit first, a hollow punch that stole his breath, memories flashing, Rivera's grin over MREs, stories of East LA sunsets, the way he'd spot a trail sign before Callahan even glassed it. Then rage, hot and blind, urging him to charge, to empty his mag into the tree line. But training clamped down Henderson's voice in his skull. Patterns kill you. Assault was suicide, artillery too blunt, wasting shells on ghosts. He needed to draw the bastard out, make him show his hand without tipping his own. Crab walking back with Rivera's body draped over his shoulders, 60 pounds of dead weight through hip-deep water, Callahan's mind churned. The swamps hid everything. Nests in the mangroves, patrols in the reeds. Direct eyes couldn't pierce it. You needed the enemy to move. By dusk, Fox holed up with the platoon. He heated a sea ration over a damp fuel tablet. Chicken noodle, steam curling like swamp fog. The can, sides slick with condensation, caught the dying sun as he pried the lid, a brilliant flash stabbing across his hole, glinting off a distant frond like Morse code from hell. He froze, staring at the dented tin, then at the jungle's edge. Light, random, harmless light. The nips trained for movement, flashbangs, shadows. But curiosity, that was human, universal, a itch you couldn't ignore. 15 minutes later, he was in Captain Morrison's CP tent, the air thick with cigarette haze and map grease. "Sir, we can't outstalk him in this soup, but we can make him come to us." He held up the can, voice steady despite the raw edge. "Not bait, exactly. More like curiosity's curse. Angle these just right at dawn, catch the sun flashes like signals, erratic, pulling eyes. They peek, we paint 'em." Morrison leaned back, scarred jaw working a chew, eyes flicking from the can to Callahan's face. Desperation hung in the division snipers, claiming 3 Marines a day, patrols coming back light. "Crazy as a fox in a henhouse, Sergeant. But hell, we're losing boys to those tree rats. Take 4 from security detail. Prove it on opportunists first, no charging that nest blind. And if it flops, it's on you." Callahan nodded, the weight lifting just a fraction. As he slipped out into the night, the jungle closed ranks again, but now he had a weapon sharper than lead, the glint of deception, forged from chow line scrap. The swamps might hide killers, but they couldn't hide the spark of an idea, and in the Solomon's green hell, that spark could ignite a firestorm. November 9 dawned sticky and sullen, the sun clawing through the overcast like it resented the job. Callahan's security detail, 4 hard-bitten riflemen from the platoon, faces smeared with charcoal and mud, humped out before first light. Crates of empties slung in their packs like contraband. The swamps off the perimeter trail turned every yard into a negotiation with the earth, boots sinking calf-deep in peat that reeked of sulfur and decay, vines snagging like barbed wire ghosts. Hand-carrying was the only way. No jeeps, no mules, just sweat and curses as they dragged the bamboo stakes and string spools through the mangroves. "Like packing for a picnic in hell," one grunted. Private Ellis, a Georgia boy with a drawl thick as the humidity. But they pushed on, 300 yards behind the lines to a ragged clearing the patrols used as a kill zone for nip runners. By 0400, they had 5 cans planted in a loose arc, dented relics from the chow line, ends trimmed, pinholes varied for different glints. One sharp as a knife edge, another diffused like a dying bulb. Callahan rigged the strings low to the deck, pulleys lashed from vine and bootlace, running back to his hide in a sniper's nest of fern and root tangle. The team's eyes flicked to him in the gloom, trust mixed with that recruit's wariness, the kind that wonders if the sergeant's lost his marbles. "Eyes sharp, boys," he murmured, scope trained on the far tree line. "This ain't shooting fish. It's fishing for fools." At 0615, the sun breached the horizon, and Callahan tugged the first line. A 3-second stab of light lanced out, pinning a flash on a nip bunker entrance 480 yards distant, erratic, like a faulty heliograph. 30 seconds of nothing, the jungle holding its breath. Then another pull, a softer glow from the second can, dancing lower, teasing the underbrush. 20 minutes of this cat and mouse, the flashes hopping positions like fireflies on bad acid. Through the Unotel's tunnel, Callahan watched shadows stir, a sentry half emerging, head cocking like a dog's at a whistle. Binoculars up, the nip glassed the clearing, assuming yank signals or some new toy. Curiosity won, training lost. Callahan's crosshair settled on the chest, wind hold a hair left for the bay's breath. The Springfield whispered, recoil, a familiar kick against his shoulder. The figure crumpled, a puppet yanked earthward. One, clean. The team exhaled as one, but Callahan was already coiling strings, the nest collapsing behind them like a sigh. 30 minutes south to a fresh hide, ghosts in the green. Half an hour later, the mortars walked the old position, 50 rounds of 81mm, spite churning empty jungle into craters, shrapnel singing harmless through the ferns. "They bite quick," Ellis muttered, slapping Callahan's back as they melted away. That night, back at the CP, Morrison's grin split the lantern light. "One fish hooked. Reel him in tomorrow." But Callahan lay awake in his slit trench, Rivera's ghost in the stars, wondering if the glint would haunt him too. November 10 brought refinement. The team moving like a wolf pack through the swamp's labyrinth stakes, hauled over shoulders, cans clinking faint in burlap sacks. 7 hides scouted by dawn, each tailored to the sun's arc, one facing east for the rise, another canted for midday glare off the bay. Callahan punched fresh holes with his trench knife, smearing some with mud to dull the shine, others polished spit shine on his sleeve. The string system evolved branches as anchors, counterweights from pebbles in pouches allowing remote tweaks without a rustle. By 0745, in a semicircle overlooking a nip supply trail, 6 cans winked in sequence, 5 seconds from the lead, 3 from the flank, a Morse-like stutter aimed at bunkers 640 yards out. The pattern hooked 'em hard. 2 nips broke cover, hunkered low but heads up, gesturing at the lights like umpires calling strikes. One raised binos, the other sketched in a notebook intel gold, or so they thought. Callahan, offset 90 degrees in a root hollow, had the drop. Perfect flank geometry, the cans a decoy drawing eyes while his scope drank the scene. Breath in, hold, exhale half. First shot, the glasser, center mass, body folding like wet paper. Second, his partner, scrambling for cover, caught mid-dive. The Springfield cycled smooth, brass ejecting into the muck. 2 more for the day, then 3 in the afternoon, a runner peeking at a solo flash, an officer signaling back with his own mirror before catching lead. By dusk, 9 confirmed, spotters from the ridge verifying through their own glass. The team shared a smoke in silence, the weight of it settling. Not just kills, but a crack in the enemy's shell. Japanese mortars probed again that evening, but scattershot now, like a man swinging at shadows. Callahan cleaned his bolt, fingers tracing the wood grain. "They're learning we're hunting," he told Ellis. "Good, means we're hurting." November 11 tested the edges. That elite nest, the one that took Rivera, loomed in Callahan's scope like a taunt. A massive banyan 700 yards east with platforms layered like a wedding cake, Coastwatch Accords pinning it as a sniper's roost, responsible for 6 marine tags. Standard flashes wouldn't budge this ghost. He was a pro, fire discipline ironclad, shifting nests like a chess master. Callahan spent the morning glassing it, mapping the micro-movements, a frond too still, a shadow too deep. The fix? Play their game intel over ambush. The command post gambit, team humping fake gear radios wrapped in ponchos, map cases bulging with blank paper, staging a conspicuous forward OP in the open, 500 yards from the target. Cans angled to signal between it and the lines, pattern bursts mimicking Yank visual comms, urgent and sloppy, bait for a snoop. At 0930, the show kicked off. Ellis and the boys played it broad, gesturing at maps, fiddling knobs on dummy sets while Callahan pulled strings from his northern blind, flashes hopping like frantic relays. 90 minutes of theatre, the swamp's steam rising like stage fog. Then, at 1115, a telltale twitch, branch sway against the breeze, elk hunter instinct screaming alert. Scope sweep. A fist-sized gap in the foliage. 712 yards. Viewer framed perfect on the fake CP. Heart steady. Callahan dialed wind 8 knots southeast. 2 feet right. 30 high muscle memory from Montana draws. At 1,127, the Arisaka's muzzle nosed out. 6 inches of betrayal. The nip braced, lining his shot. Callahan beat him to the draw. 30-06 arcing true. Punching through the slit. Skull shot clean. The barrel drooped. Then gravity took over. Body crashing platforms in a splintered tumble, thudding groundward like a felled pine. Marines swept the site by dusk logbook in hand, tallying 53 Yank kills over months, plus a sergeant's stripes from the 6th Division's Shadow Warriors. Callahan's count hit 12 for the day, but that one weighed heaviest. Rivera's echo silenced. Lieutenant Colonel O'Brien called him in that night. Maps unrolled under bulb light. 15 nests ID'd sector-wide, chewing our patrols. Your light show? It's flipping the script. 5 days greenlit, dedicated team, sole mission, bleed the snipers dry. As Callahan nodded, the jungle outside thrummed with rain, washing the day's brass clean. But in his bunk, doubt flickered how long before the ghosts turned the tables. November 12 escalated, cans numbering 8 now, positioned in a web spanning the swamp's fingers, logistics a beast. The team ferrying stakes across log bridges that groaned underfoot. Patterns grew bold, coordinated stutters suggesting Yank build-ups, flashes chaining like a division's chatter. Midday, 16 kills. Recon teams breaking cover to trace the net, officers exposed mid-brief, each peak a death sentence. Major Tishi Yamamoto's diary, captured later, spilled the frustration. Enemy signals, unknown optical deceptions drawing blood. Observers perish, cannot discern feint from thrust. Morale frays like rope in salt. The Nips pulled back 100 yards that afternoon. Fire discipline clamping down, no more probes, just silence. Callahan adapted on the fly, integrating artillery, a flash sequence spotting for the 105 seconds, luring spotters who called their own barrages, only to eat counter-battery from the bay. Marines' hell eased fractionally, patrols lighter on tags, foxholes less like graves but the swamp's toll mounted. Fever from the muck, rations souring in the heat. By November 13, the gambits layered thick, patrol signals mimicking scout handoffs, observer sims flashing cords to phantom guns. 27 that day, highest yet runners in the open, bunker crews piling out to chase ghosts. The team's rhythm a machine now, calls hushed over field phones to ridge spotters. Japanese paranoia bloomed. A captured private scrawl later read, "Demon lights from nowhere squad whittled to bones investigating. Eyes lie, trust nothing." Callahan's hands shook that evening. Not from recoil but the grind, 5 days blurring into one endless scope stare, the green bleeding into dreams. Ellis clapped his shoulder. "You're carving 'em, Sarge." Rivera's smiling somewhere. November 14 peaked the madness. 20 cans woven into the perimeter's fringe, sun traps slung in low branches for multi-angle hits. The assault feint was the crown. Flashes pulsing like a brigade muster, drawing a full reposition platoon shuffling across clearings, officers bellowing from the rear. Over 90 minutes, 11 fell. 2 lieutenants mid-map huddle, their deaths rippling command chaos, squads freezing in the open. 31 total, the team's faces gaunt but fierce, sharing jerky in a root cellar as dusk fell. O'Brien's runner brought word, 103 confirmed, 89 verified. Revolutionary Sergeant. Divisions buzzing. But as mortars whispered distant that night, Callahan traced the can's dents by touch. The Nips were adapting clouds tomorrow. Yet the line held, psyches cracking louder than rifles. November 15 broke grey, overcast smothering the sun, the swamp exhaling mist like a dragon's breath. No light, no lure. But Callahan had contingencies, scrounged from supply, spent, 50 calories casings, resonant as bells, pebbles rattling inside for sound traps. Rigged in bushes and boughs with the same strings, they hummed movement gear clanks, boot scrapes echoing false patrols. 9 more by midday. Investigators drawn to the phantom rustles, one officer mapping a flank that wasn't there, chest shot at 630. At 1,545, the finale, a captain threading positions, map out, as casings jangled diversion. Callahan's round ended it, clean through the humid veil. At 1,600 sharp, 5 days done, the team withdrew lines intact, ghosts quieted. 112 confirmed, 97 glassed. The jungle sighed, but the war's math had shifted. Not lead for lead, but mind over matter, sunlight and scrap rewriting the score. As the team ghosted back through the swamp's twilight fingers, the perimeter's wire glinting like a faint lifeline, Callahan felt the weight settle, not just the Springfield slung heavy across his back, but the tally etched in his mind. 112 souls dispatched, each a flash-born revelation in the green inferno. 97 verified by the Ridge Spotters' theodolites and forward observers' logs, the rest pieced from sweeps that turned up blood trails and abandoned gear snagged in the mangroves. The security detail moved wordless, faces carved from the same gaunt wood as their stakes, Private Ellis breaking the hush only once. "We done good, Sarge. River'd say we turned their hunt inside out." Callahan nodded into the murk, but his thoughts snagged on the officer's map from that last shot, creased paper marked with phantom lines, now just pulp in the muck. Good? Maybe? Necessary? God, yes. But the jungle didn't tally morality, it just swallowed the echoes. By 1800, they reported to O'Brien's CP, a canvas lean-to ringed by ammo crates and the low growl of field phones linking to the bay's big guns. The colonel, sleeves rolled to elbows, pored over a grease pencil sketch of the sector, red X's blooming like blood flowers where nests had fallen silent. "Sitrep, Sergeant," he said, voice gravel over coffee steam. Callahan laid it out flat. The gambits, the yields, the nips pivot from probes to paralysis. O'Brien's eyes sharpened at the numbers. 112. Christ. That's not sniping, that's a goddamn psyops symphony. We've ID'd 57 as shooters or spotters, tree rats that tagged our boys like it was sport. 19 brass or stripes, command links snapped clean. He tapped a sidebar note. Intel haul from the sweeps, logbooks, sketches of marine positions, even a coded roster hinting at the 23rd Regiment's full order of battle. Coast watchers cross-checked it against their hill radios. The pieces fit, painting a picture of reinforcements stalled at the Naro, blind without their eyes. The assessment ran deeper than bodies. Division G2 pegged a 60% drop in NIP recon patrols, ghosting wide, bunkers buttoned tight, no more whispers of marine movements feeding back to Rabal. That blindness bought breathing room for the beachhead, feeding into the bigger play. Operation Cartwheel, MacArthur's island-hopping vice clamping the Solomon's back door, isolating the Japanese fortress at Rabal without a head-on slugfest. Artillery tallies backed it 5,760 rounds from the cruisers in those first beachhead days had softened the edges. But Callahan's flashes cracked the core, turning swamp patrols from meat grinders to mop-ups. "You forced their hand," O'Brien said, sliding a flask across the plank table. "They adapt now, no chasing lights, pulling back a click, enforcing radio silence on anything shiny. Major Yamamoto's bunch? Diary we nabbed paints it black. Demon sniper shatters battalion. Observers refuse duty. Morale dissolves like mist. Cannot hold without sight." Callahan took a pull from the flask, rock gut burning clean, then pushed it back. "Sir, it was the team. And the cans. But it's their psychology we broke, not just positions. They trained to counter bullets. We gave them riddles." O'Brien leaned in, lantern shadows dancing. "Precisely. Reports going up. Employment of improvised optical deception in jungle counter-sniper ops. Recommend you for the cross. Reassignment to Pendleton for the school. Train 'em your way, mind first, trigger second." The words hung, a bridge from the green hell to something steadier, but Callahan's gaze drifted to the tent flap, where rain pattered the canopy like distant Morse. Pride flickered. Sure, the line held. Boys lived, but under it, a hollow ache. 112 men, each with a face in the flash. Sons, maybe fathers, drilled to die in this steambox a world from home. "Necessary doesn't mean clean, sir," he said quiet. "Just necessary." Outside, the swamp exhaled its nightly symphony, mortars silent for the first time in days. The ghosts had quieted, but Callahan knew better. Wars didn't end with tallies. They lingered in the glint of a can, the sway of a frond, the what-ifs that haunted the long watch. And as the team bunked down, rifles close, the Solomon's stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to a sergeant who'd turned sunlight into reckoning and paid the toll in echoes that no report could tally. 2 weeks later, in a rear base aid station on Guadalcanal's drier fringes far from Bougainville's swampy moor, Callahan stared at the canvas ceiling, the doc's words blurring in the morphine haze. "Combat fatigue," the Navy surgeon called it, scribbling notes on a chart that smelled of iodine and regret. 5 days of scope stare and string pull had carved hollows under his eyes, dreams tangled with flashes that weren't sunlight but muzzle blooms, Rivera's laugh echoing in the cracks. The Corps gave him space. No patrols, just chow and the Pacific's trade winds rattling the palms. He filled the hours with ink and paper, at O'Brien's nudge, penning the after-action, optical deception devices in counter-sniper engagements. Pages spilled out diagrams of pulley rigs sketched on ration backs, breakdowns of gambit psychology, exploit the untrainable, curiosity as the chink in discipline's armor. By January 44, it was bound in manila folders, winging stateside to Pendleton's sniper school, where Henderson himself would thumb it, muttering, "Kid changed the game." Callahan never ghosted the lines again. Orders came swift. Gunnery Sergeant now, instructor billet at Camp Pendleton, trading jungle rot for California surf. For the war's tail end, he molded over 400 raw recruits, not into trigger jerks, but thinkers. Classrooms under eucalyptus shade, he ditched the range for sand tables strewn with twigs and mirrors scavenged from supply. "The rifle's a hammer," he'd say, voice steady as bitterroot granite. "But war's a puzzle. Enemy drills for the nail. You give 'em smoke." Deception modules bloomed from his playbook. Heliograph feints, sound lures from shell casings, the core tenet: observe, anticipate, invert their instincts. Grads shipped out to Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo's Black Ash, carrying not just Springfields but the seed of mind over muck. Supply chains caught wind. By 44's end, mirror plates, polished aluminum blanks, issued like bayonets, stocked every scout pack, standard kit through Okinawa's caves. The Navy Cross pinned on in March 45, back home at a quiet Missoula ceremony, brass from Butte saluting a farm boy who'd turned trash to triumph. Citation read crisp: extraordinary heroism, tactical innovation, neutralizing enemy observation with unprecedented efficacy. But Callahan, in civvies by November, hung it in the attic, dust gathering beside Daddy's old six. Montana called him back, high school, history teacher and track coach for 40 years, whistle around his neck, chalk on his slacks. Classrooms smelled of erasers and adolescent sweat, not cordite, but the lessons bled through. History ain't dates, kids. It's choices under fire. Spot the pattern, break it. Former students, grey now themselves, recall him patient as a stalk, urging creative fixes for life's dead ends. No tools junk if your head's right. He married late, raised two who never shipped out, and spoke war sparse. A 1978 VFW interview pulling the thread. Folks fix on the score, 1-12. But it was trust that tallied. Core let a sergeant swing wild. That initiative? That's the real win. The soup can's shadow stretched long. Bougainville's hall fed cartwheel's jaws, choking Rabal's supply veins without a D-Day bloodbath. Halsey's carriers pounding the harbour blind. Thanks to intel gaps, Callahan's ghosts had widened. Japanese manuals, snatched in 45's mop-ups, bore the scars. Protocols etched in haste. Anomalous lights, officer sanction mandatory, probes from cover only. Presumed deception in all auditory variances. When the enemy scribes countermeasures for your parlor trick, you've etched doctrine deep. Post-war scribes weighed it tactical, not tide-turning historians like Manchester in Goodbye Darkness, nodding to the psyop punch, the morale rot that turned banzai charges to whispers. Vietnam's vines echoed it. Marine snipers in Da Nang's paddies rigging bamboo mirrors, Huey door gunners flashing wing polish to bait VC spotters. Modern echoes ping louder drone decoys in Hellman's dust, cyber ghosts spoofing radar blips, the same play. Force the peak, claim the price. Today, in the National Museum of the Marine Corps at Quantico's edge, Callahan's Springfield gleams under glass, barrel etched with jungle scars, flanked by 3 rusted relics, Campbell's tins, dredged from Bougainville's reclaim in '07, dents like battle stars. The placard whispers, ordinary refuse, extraordinary resolve, emblem of ingenuity that pierced the Pacific's veil. Beside it, the manual's spine cracks open to his chapter, now canon in Scout Sniper School's syllabus. Constraints birth creation, observation arms action, psyche outstrips steel. Veterans' reunions toast him quiet, the old salts swapping yarns of Tommy's tin terror, his coaching ghost in the stands urging one more lap. Callahan passed in May 2003, 81 and unbowed, Missoula's mountains cradling his rest. A final interview, 2002, caught the measure, proud we prevailed, sure. Helped brothers breathe easier by dimming their lights. But killing ain't pride's domain. Every flash took a life, somebody's kin, fighting their truth. War's necessity, not nobility. Those words linger, a counterpoint to the myth. Innovation from the lean, yes, but laced with the war's grey grain. In an age of smart bombs and satellite stares, his cans remind tech amplifies, but the mind invents. Understand the foe's itch, scratch it fatal, innovate relentless, pass the torch unburned. Thomas Michael Callahan, ranch hand turned riddle weaver, proved wars turn not on factories raw, but a farm boy's glint in the green. The jungle's overgrown, the echoes hushed, but the lesson gleams eternal. Sometimes victory's just sunlight, bent right.